About 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 will be diagnosed with some form of dementia, and that number jumps to nearly 1 in 3 after 85. And here's the shocking truth. It may seem like an inevitable fate, but it isn't. Research from leading neuroscience centers shows that people who keep their brains active can cut that risk by up to 50% in their likelihood of developing dementia. And now, listen carefully. When you stop learning, your brain begins a silent process of deterioration. Memory becomes fragile. Reasoning slows down. Creativity fades. You start to lose the very thing that makes you human, the ability to think freely, to question, to create. You probably know that our bodies need constant stimulation. When someone stops training their muscles, what happens? They shrink, they weaken, they become fragile. The brain is like an invisible muscle. When we stop reasoning, questioning, and learning, it begins to wither in silence. The connections that support memory, logic, and creativity start to break down. And this process gives no warning. One day you simply wake up and realize you're forgetting simple details. You no longer think as clearly. And the mental energy that once felt natural is gone. Hundreds of millions of people around the world already live this reality. Many don't realize that the root cause is not just age or cruel destiny, but the lack of constant mental stimulation. How many times have you heard someone say, "I got old and lost my memory"? What almost no one tells you is that memory loss doesn't come from age itself, but from stagnation. A person stops challenging themselves, stops studying, stops learning new things, and the mind shifts into survival mode. It stops growing because it sees no need. And when that happens, not only does memory weaken, but the entire body begins to respond with signs of decline. But don't worry, there is a solution. You can change everything starting today, if you're willing. Imagine being able to stop this process before it even begins. Imagine living your whole life with mental clarity, with the energy to learn something new every single day. It's not just about reading more books or memorizing information. It's about staying alive on the inside, about challenging your mind at every moment, like a scientist facing the unknown. And here's the key. Continuous learning is like oxygen that keeps this extraordinary machine running at peak performance. Without challenges, without new information, without curiosity, the brain suffocates. But when you feed it with study, with reasoning, with bold questions, something amazing happens. It builds new connections, strengthens memory, opens doors that once seemed closed. And this is not only for the young, not only for scholars, it's for everyone, at any age. Imagine living your entire life with mental clarity. This is not just about reading more books. It's about staying alive on the inside. It's about constantly challenging yourself, acting like a scientist before the unknown, and keeping the flame of curiosity alive. Because if you stop learning, your brain gets sick. Now that you understand the danger of letting your brain sit idle, the inevitable question arises. What can you do to keep it from wasting away? The answer is clear. You have to keep it moving. And I'm not just talking about crossword puzzles or memorizing numbers. I'm talking about a lifetime of challenges, of new experiences, of insatiable curiosity. Every time you learn something new, every time you push your mind to wrestle with a different concept, it responds by creating new connections, strengthening old ones, and opening pathways that didn't exist before. It's as if you were expanding an invisible map inside your head. Every new word, every idea, every calculation, every reflection is a brick added to that mental construction. And here's the secret. No matter your age, the brain can always be trained. Think with me. An older person who decides to learn a new language challenges their mind just like a young student would. They're not just memorizing words or phrases. They're expanding circuits, forcing the brain to build new connections, exercising memory, attention, and even creativity. Each word learned is like a weight lifted in the gym of the mind, and science has already shown this effort drastically reduces the chance of developing dementia. Now picture another scene. A man of the same age, but who decided to stop. He repeats the same routine every day, never reads anything new, never challenges himself to understand something different. His brain conserves energy, settles, begins to shut down connections that are no longer used. It's like a muscle that weakens until it has no strength left. In a short time, memory lapses appear, reasoning slows down, and what could have been prevented turns into destiny. That's why we can never stop studying, reading, talking with people who think differently, learning music, writing, daring to take on new intellectual challenges. All of this works like a vaccine for the brain. It's the invisible shield against forgetting. Now pay close attention to me because I have a challenge for you. I want you to pick, in your head, one number between 0 and 10. Got it? Now pick another number, between 11 and 20. Hold those two numbers firmly in your mind. Now, without paper, without a calculator, only with the power of your reasoning, multiply them together. Take a deep breath, think slowly, do the math in your head. It may seem simple, but this small exercise is already activating connections you often leave dormant. If you went with 8 and 19, may the universe help you. I sure won't. And here's the most important part. Write the result of that multiplication in the comments. Leave it there. That will show not only that you listened, but that you acted, that you're not just a spectator, but an active participant in strengthening your own mind. The more you exercise your mind, the more protected you become. And here's the point I want you to remember. It's not about age, it's about attitude. The brain of an older person who keeps learning stays younger than that of a younger adult who stopped challenging themselves. Whoever keeps curiosity alive, whoever never stops seeking knowledge, not only protects memory, but also gains vitality for an entire lifetime. Now listen carefully. You need a practical guide that will keep you disciplined even when motivation disappears. Because the truth is simple. Motivation is like the wind, it comes and goes. What sustains you is habit, routine, the conscious choice not to stop. Pay close attention now because I'm going to give you powerful techniques to train your mind every single day. First, choose something you enjoy, but that also demands effort. It could be learning a language, playing guitar, solving chess problems, writing stories, painting, or even studying mathematics. The secret is to unite pleasure and challenge. What entertains you keeps you consistent. What challenges you expands your mind. And once you've learned, start teaching. Yes, teaching. Because teaching is the key that accelerates learning, deepens understanding, and turns information into wisdom. When you explain something to another person, your brain has to organize ideas, simplify complex concepts, and find examples that make sense. This process not only locks memory in place, but multiplies the strength of neural connections. It's as if by teaching, you etched knowledge into a deeper layer of your mind. And here's the most amazing part. You don't need a classroom for this. You can teach your grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends, anyone. You can even teach yourself. Yes, talk out loud in the car, in the bathroom, in front of the mirror. Imagine you're explaining to an invisible audience. Every time you put yourself in this role, your mind grows stronger. Science has already shown that the brain learns in stages. First, when you receive information, then when you practice. But the peak comes when you teach. That's when your mind realizes what it truly knows and what it still needs to learn. Now imagine the impact this could have on your life. You read a book and then explain it to someone. You learn a new word in another language and teach it to your grandchild. You study a complex idea and then summarize it out loud, as if you were giving a lecture. This habit turns knowledge into mastery. And here's the final key. Don't wait to become an expert to start teaching. Teach from the very beginning, even if it's only a little. Because every explanation is training. Every attempt to translate a concept is a victory of the brain over stagnation. A master is not someone who knows everything, but someone who never stops learning and sharing. Second technique. Set small, consistent goals. Don't try to learn 100 words at once. Learn 5 words a day, but do it every day. The mind responds better to consistency than to bursts of effort. The brain loves rhythm. Train active memory. It's not enough to read or listen, you need to recall. Close the book and try to repeat what you read. Pause the video and explain to yourself what you just heard. It's in this effort to remember that memory strengthens. Create a fixed ritual. Just like you brush your teeth without thinking, make mental training a non-negotiable habit. It can be 20 minutes in the morning or half an hour before bed. What matters is that it's sacred, a promise you make to yourself. Third technique, eliminate distractions, turn off notifications, create a quiet space. Your brain cannot grow if it's constantly being pulled away. Focus is the bridge between you and knowledge. Fourth technique, mix pleasure with discipline. Read about topics you love, but once in a while choose something difficult. Learning only what you like won't expand the mind. Facing what makes you uncomfortable is what creates new connections. Fifth technique, reward yourself. Every time you reach your goal, celebrate. A coffee, a walk, a break. The brain responds to reward and associates effort with pleasure. Imagine this. If you dedicate just 20 minutes a day to this process, in 1 year, you'll have invested more than 120 hours in training your mind. And that could be the difference between a brain that fades and a brain that keeps shining until the very last day of your life. Discipline is the key. Don't wait for motivation. Expect results. Every day you keep the habit alive, you are building an invisible fortress that protects your memory, your identity, and your freedom. So starting today, make it a ritual. Learn, explain, teach, even if it's just to yourself, because teaching is learning twice. And that's the path to keeping your mind alive, strong, and luminous until the final second of your life. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep your brain young and sharp, because here I'll show you how to never let your mind stop. Leave a comment telling me what you thought about this reflection. What struck you the most? What are you going to start applying from today on? Remember, every comment is one more step in this mental training, because learning alone is powerful, but learning in community, sharing ideas, is even more transformative. So comment, like, subscribe, turn on the bell, and never let your brain stop. Pay close attention to me right now, because I'm about to reveal something you probably never stopped to think about. Your own brain is a liar. Yes, the most sophisticated machine in the universe, the one that carries all your knowledge and memories, has a dangerous trick. It makes you believe you've learned something, when in reality, you haven't learned anything at all. But relax. Don't go picking a fight with your husband or wife just because their brain is a liar too. That's a factory defect, not bad intentions. If it weren't, nobody would survive a family dinner. But now, let's get serious. Most of the time, you don't actually forget what you learned. The truth is, you never really understood it. It was your brain trying to trick you into giving up and going off to do something easier. And this is exactly where the secret lies. The brain prefers to save energy and stick to simpler things. So when you take a complex subject and simplify it, you're speaking the language it understands. It's like turning a scary monster into a child's toy. Suddenly, what seemed impossible becomes interesting, even fun, and accessible. The brain gets curious. It stops running away. Think about this. If you try to memorize the formula for gravity, you'll get lost in symbols. But if you translate it into something simple, gravity is the way the universe keeps things from flying off. Your mind opens up. Complexity becomes clarity. The brain would rather have you put in as little effort as possible, make you think you've understood, and then push you to spend energy on immediate survival tasks. The problem is, in the modern world, this trap is deadly for anyone who truly wants to learn. Imagine this. You read a chapter in a book, close it, and think, okay, I got it. But the truth is you didn't. You just recognize the words. And the brain loves this trick. It confuses familiarity with understanding. It's like looking at an old photo. You recognize the image, but that doesn't mean you know the story behind it. Recognition is not knowledge. That's the first point I want you to take away. Don't trust that comfortable feeling of, I already understand. Whew. It's an illusion. Now think about this. If the brain loves the easy path, why try to learn in the hardest possible way? When you study a subject filled with jargon and complicated phrases, your brain quickly gives up. It hates meaningless effort. The secret is to simplify, to turn the complicated into simple, the obscure into clear, the heavy into light. When you simplify, you're not dumbing it down. You're making it accessible to your own thinking. It's like translating a foreign language into your native tongue. Suddenly, everything makes sense. But here's the problem. Schools and universities teach us the exact opposite. They throw formulas, dates, and ready-made definitions at us, expecting us to memorize and repeat. And memorization is the biggest mistake of all. The brain doesn't like memorizing. It likes understanding. When you try to just memorize, what happens? You forget. It's inevitable. The information walks in through the door, but it never finds a place to stay. You memorize it for the test, but after a few days, poof, it's gone. And this is where one of the greatest secrets comes in. If you want to truly learn, you need to teach. Teach even when you don't know it perfectly. Teach by talking to yourself, in the shower, in the car, in front of the mirror. Teach to a child, to a friend, even to someone imaginary. When you try to explain, the brain immediately notices the gaps, notices what's missing, and starts working to fill those holes. It's in this effort of turning the complex into the simple that real learning happens. The brain only learns when it's forced to organize, to connect, to transform. If you only read and repeat, it keeps lying to you, pretending you know. But when you explain, even imperfectly, you force your mind to build a solid structure. It's like laying the foundation of a house. Without it, everything collapses. Now imagine this. You spend hours reading, highlighting, repeating, and when it comes time to actually use what you studied, nothing. Empty. The mind feels like a drawer stuffed with loose papers. And do you know why? Because you're studying the wrong way. The brain doesn't learn from colorful highlights or the false sense that reviewing silently is enough. It learns when it is forced to build, to organize, to transform. And here lies the key to turning any subject into true knowledge. You must be able to explain it as if you were talking to a child. If you can't, it means you haven't understood it yet. And this is the moment when most people realize the big illusion. The mind loves to pretend it knows. It's satisfied with memorized phrases, but it can't recreate the reasoning behind them. The brain likes what's simple. It was built to look for shortcuts. But here's the secret. When you simplify something yourself, you're not just making it easier, you're forcing your mind to organize chaos, to translate confusion into clarity. That's real learning. Want an example? Think about quantum physics. Many people give up the moment they hear the name because they imagine endless formulas and impossible equations. But what if I put it this way? Quantum physics studies the hidden rules that govern the invisible world of particles, which behave in strange, almost magical ways, but still follow their own laws. Suddenly, what seemed unreachable becomes an invitation to curiosity. Or take Einstein's relativity. It sounds impossible, but it's simple. Time is not the same for everyone. Whoever moves faster feels time passing more slowly. It's like being on a bus. To you sitting inside, the clock seems to tick normally, but to someone watching the bus go by, it looks different. That's all relativity is. Time and space change depending on speed. Now think about derivatives in math. Many people freeze when they see the symbols, but simplify it. A derivative is just asking, what's the speed right now? If a car is going 50 miles per hour, the derivative is telling you exactly that, the rate of change at that moment. And DNA? It sounds intimidating, like something only a mad scientist would understand. But in reality, it's just a recipe book inside your body. The letters are the ingredients, and each recipe produces a protein. And proteins are what build everything in you. Skin, hair, muscles. Another example, the second law of thermodynamics. Complicated name, but it's really this simple. Everything tends to get messy on its own. A clean room will never magically get cleaner by itself. It always moves toward disorder. To bring order, you have to spend energy. Even complex numbers, which sound scary, are simple. They're just a way of dealing with problems that didn't have answers before, like the square root of a negative number. It's like inventing a new tool in math to solve problems nobody could solve before. Do you see it? What once seemed impossible becomes obvious once you simplify. The brain stops running away because now it understands the logic. The secret isn't memorizing. It's translating the strange into something you already know. And when you simplify and start using the technique of explaining out loud, something magical happens inside your brain. It's like it gets exposed. While you're reading silently, it can pretend it understands. But when you try to put it into words out loud, the lie shows up immediately. You forget. And that's wonderful, because now you know exactly where the gaps in your knowledge are. Picture this. You're in the car trying to explain to a friend how gravity works. If all you've memorized is the phrase, "Gravity is the force that pulls bodies toward the center of the earth," you'll stop there. But when you start to explain it out loud, you realize you don't know why it acts that way, or how it works on other planets. That discomfort is the sign your mind needs to really get to work. Do this all the time. Do it alone. Explain as if you were teaching it to children. And then you might ask me, but what if people call me crazy? Let me tell you something. If someone catches you talking to yourself in the shower about Einstein's theory of relativity, yeah, they might think it's odd. But you know what's even stranger? Studying for 10 years of your life and forgetting it all in 2 weeks. That's the real madness. If they call you crazy, thank them. Say, "Thank you, I'm practicing the same method that won Richard Feynman a Nobel Prize. And you, still repeating things like a parrot?" And flash that victorious smile. Think about it. Which would you rather be? The crazy one who really learns, or the normal one who memorizes today and forgets tomorrow? The person talking to themselves in the car about physics might look eccentric, but the person who never tries keeps falling for their brain's lies. And it doesn't matter if you explain it wrong, if you invent weird analogies, if your explanation sounds childish. That's the whole point. It's by trying to explain things simply, even in silly ways, that you discover whether you truly learned. If the explanation comes out clear, you've mastered it. If you get stuck, you go back, study again, simplify more, and try once more. That cycle is pure gold. Now think about how powerful this is. When you explain out loud, you're not just repeating. You're creating new connections in the brain. You're training your long-term memory, reinforcing neural pathways that won't fade away with time. It's the difference between writing something in the sand and carving it in stone. Now type this in the comments. I won't let my brain fool me. When you write it, it's the beginning of reprogramming your mind. You're declaring that you refuse to be tricked by a lazy brain. From this simple act, you start awakening a new version of yourself, more focused, more disciplined, more unstoppable. Make this your first step toward achieving the impossible. Pay close attention now, because this part is decisive. You can simplify a subject. You can explain it out loud, even to your dog, but without effort and discipline, all of it dissolves into thin air. Knowledge has to be watered every day, like a plant that only grows when it's cared for. The problem is that the brain hates continuous effort. It loves immediate reward. That's why you can spend hours on social media but complain about 5 minutes of studying. But true knowledge doesn't come from ease. It's born out of discomfort. Think of a muscle. You don't get strong by lifting a weight once. You get strong by repeating, by feeling the pain, by pushing through the resistance. The brain works the same way. Every time you review, explain again, simplify again, you're lifting mental weights. It's tiring, but that's how the mind becomes sharp. Now imagine this. You simplify Einstein's theory of relativity. You explain it out loud. You spot the gaps. What should you do next? Go back. Read again. Think again. Speak again. That again is what shapes memory. Here's where effort comes in. It's not enough to understand once. You need to consolidate. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't have discipline, you'll never have consistency. And without consistency, there is no lasting learning. The brain needs spaced repetition, constant returns to the subject. It's like sharpening a blade. Each stroke removes an imperfection until the blade can cut through the impossible. Discipline isn't studying when you're motivated. Discipline is studying even when you don't feel like it, even when it's boring, even when the bed is calling your name. That's the moment when you stop being a prisoner of your lazy brain and become its master. So remember this, simplifying opens the door, Teaching out loud is stepping through it, but discipline is what keeps you on the other side. Now let me ask you a question. What makes someone get out of bed before the sun rises? What makes someone endure sleepless nights studying, practicing, failing, and trying again? It's not talent. It's not luck. It's desire. Desire is the invisible fuel that pushes you through any obstacle. If you want to be better, you first have to truly want it. Desire is not a superficial wish. It's when you feel you can't live without it. It's when studying stops being an obligation and becomes part of who you are. But desire needs direction. That's where willpower comes in. Desire is the spark. Willpower is the movement. It's saying, I won't wait for perfect conditions. I'll start now with what I have. Willpower doesn't ask for permission. It acts, even when you don't know the whole path. And above all, you need a purpose. Purpose is the compass. Without it, you run in circles. With it, even the heaviest effort gains meaning. Those who have purpose don't study just to pass a test. They study to transform themselves, to leave a mark, to serve something greater. Imagine this. Two people are carrying stones. One complains, says it's heavy, says it doesn't make sense. The other smiles because they know they're building a cathedral. The stone is the same, the effort is the same, but purpose changes everything. Do you want to become better? Then feed your desire every single day. Turn that desire into willpower, into practical action, and guide that willpower with a purpose so great that even the hardest days become part of your victory. Because in the end, knowledge isn't just about piling up information. It's about becoming someone capable of achieving the impossible. And only those with burning desires, steady will, and clear purpose ever get there. Now, to make a commitment to yourself, write this in the comments. From today on, I will study, simplify, and teach. That will be your public commitment to true learning. And if this video made sense to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember this, true learning is not in what you read, but in what you can transform inside yourself. Knowledge doesn't change the world just by existing. It changes the world when it changes you. Successful people think differently because they're not worried about other people's judgment. While the world criticizes, they create. While most people are busy protecting their reputation, they're too busy searching for the truth. And here's the key. Thinking differently is not an aesthetic choice. It's an intellectual survival skill. If you think like everyone else, you'll end up with the same results as everyone else. And the average is harsh. Uninspiring jobs, lives with no purpose, routines where people wake up, work, complain, and go to sleep. Nothing more. Is that really living? Or is it just surviving? Pay close attention now, because this may change the course of your life. Think differently or die average. Stop believing what everyone else believes. Stop repeating what everyone else says. Every success story begins with someone who dared to disagree with normality. Not because they wanted to look rebellious, but because curiosity was stronger than the fear of judgment. And it's this curiosity, directed and disciplined, that opens doors the average will never see. So think differently. And if you decide to think differently, prepare yourself for something greater. The freedom to learn anything, to create paths no one has created, to master your own mind. Listen carefully now, because what I'm about to reveal lies behind every genius mind: curiosity. Ordinary people lose curiosity over time. They accept ready-made answers, stop asking questions, stop investigating. They think they already know enough. And that's the moment mediocrity sets in. Now look at the people who truly stood out. Scientists, entrepreneurs, creative leaders. They all had one thing in common. They never stopped asking questions. Even if they didn't understand something, they would ask again and again and again until the answer finally made sense in their mind. This is the first step to thinking differently. Many people are embarrassed to raise their hand and say, "I don't understand," afraid of being criticized. In a classroom, the student who asks too many questions is easily labeled as stupid. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The one who asks questions is one step ahead. The one who questions shows the courage to learn. That's why, if you want to start thinking differently, begin with the simple act of admitting your doubt. The courage to ask is the mark of someone who refuses to remain ordinary. Now pay attention to me because I'll show you how to truly think differently. Thinking differently is a daily exercise in intellectual freedom. The first step is to do what you love. When you work or study something that sparks passion, your energy multiplies. Normal is waking up tired because you spend energy on activities that don't inspire you. Different is waking up hungry for life because you're investing your time in what makes sense. Ask yourself, if nobody judged me, what would I choose to learn, to create, or to build? That answer points to your true path. Second, protect your mental independence. That means not letting other people's opinions become the filter for what you think or do. Most people fear being criticized, fear being called strange. But remember, everyone who changed the world was ridiculed before they were applauded. Thinking differently always bothers people because it exposes the mediocrity of those who follow the herd. Third, feed your curiosity without fear. Ask, test, explore. That's the fuel of innovation. Don't accept anything just because everyone does it this way. Ask yourself, is there another way? The simple act of questioning already puts you on another level. Fourth, simplify your life to free up energy for the essential. Those who think like everyone else get lost in excess. Those who think differently focus on what matters. If you're exhausted, it's hard to have the clarity to think in a new way. Energy is born from being aligned with purpose, eliminating the unnecessary, and putting strength into what truly moves your life. Pay close attention now, because what I'm about to tell you is one of the mind's biggest prisons, the fear of being different. Most people don't live their own ideas. They live other people's ideas. They're shaped by the opinions of family, friends, society, the media. They spend life trying to please, to fit in, to be accepted. But those who think differently understand something simple. If you always seek approval, you'll never have clarity. To think differently, you must learn to shield your mind against the pressure of the majority. And that starts with a daily exercise. Every time you feel tempted to do something just because everyone does it, stop and ask, does this really make sense to me? Does it bring me closer to what I want? Or does it just make me like everyone else? That simple question is enough to expose the automatic choices that keep you stuck in the average. Remember, life is too short to live dependent on other people's approval. Another point, choose carefully the voices you listen to. I'm not saying ignore everything and everyone, but be discerning. Ask yourself, does this person have results I admire? Do they live what they preach? Or do they just repeat what they've heard? If not, why give their opinion so much weight? Learn to separate constructive criticism from noise. And here's a powerful detail. The courage to stand by your own vision earns respect, even from those who disagree. At first, you may be criticized. You may even be ridiculed. But over time, when results appear, the same people who laughed at you go quiet. Nothing is more convincing than the evidence of a life lived with purpose and authenticity. Thinking differently is swimming against the current. It's bearing the pressure of judgment without giving in. It's choosing the clarity of your conscience over the empty applause of the crowd. And when you train yourself in this, you realize that freedom isn't being accepted. It's living true to what you believe, even if no one claps. Thinking differently isn't an inborn talent. It's a trained habit. You're not born outside the box. You build the box and then learn to break it every day. That takes discipline, and discipline is born from rituals. If you want to stand out, you need to turn curiosity and mental independence into concrete actions that shape how you think. The first ritual is the daily question. Pick any situation in your life and ask, why is this done this way? Don't accept the first answer. Go deeper. Who said it has to be like this? Is there a better, simpler, faster way to do it? When repeated every day, this exercise trains your mind not to settle for ready-made answers. The second ritual is explaining out loud. When you learn something new, don't keep it to yourself. Explain it. Even if it's to the mirror. When you speak, your mind organizes, your ideas align, and the gaps show up. That's the moment you discover if you truly understood. This simple habit will accelerate your ability to learn 10 times more than someone who only reads and repeats. The third ritual is creative review. At the end of the day, take one idea or important concept you learned and recreate it in your own words. Use a metaphor, a story, an example from your life. This act of recreation makes the idea stop being external and become part of you. It's in this act that different thinking begins to flourish. And finally, the ritual of conscious observation. Set aside a few minutes to observe something ordinary and ask yourself, what is no one else seeing here? It could be an object, a situation, even a conversation. This practice trains your eyes to see beyond the obvious. That's how innovations are born, from someone who looked at the ordinary and saw the extraordinary. Those who practice these rituals don't just think differently, they begin to live on another level of perception. And that difference builds up day after day until it becomes an advantage impossible to ignore. But here's the truth. The path of those who think differently is never easy. They are misunderstood, judged, often humiliated. The crowd cannot stand those who break the pattern because independent thinking exposes the mediocrity of those who prefer to follow the herd. It's easier to call someone crazy than to admit they might have seen something you didn't. But listen, every great person you admire went through this. Galileo was condemned for seeing beyond what the church accepted. Bruce Lee was ridiculed for mixing styles and creating his own philosophy. All of them were seen as too different until the world had to bow to the evidence of what they built. And here's the secret few have the courage to accept. Thinking differently is expensive in the beginning, but it pays dividends forever. The rejection you feel today is the same energy that will fuel your victory tomorrow. This is the path of those who refuse to die average. They choose truth over acceptance, curiosity over indifference, courage over fear. And with that, they build something that lasts, something that inspires, something that cannot be erased. So I tell you, if you want to think differently, be prepared to be misunderstood, be ready to be criticized, but also be certain that in the end you will be remembered. Because no one remembers the crowd that merely repeated. History remembers the names of those who dared to be unique. Think differently, protect your flame, and never bow to mediocrity. Because in the end, you either have the courage to live as an exception, or you accept dying as just another in the average. Now it's on you. I want you to prove to yourself that you've chosen to think differently. Write in the comments, I will never accept dying being influenced. This phrase is more than words. It's a pact with your mind, a declaration that you will not bow to mediocrity. And if you enjoyed this lesson, leave your like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because here you'll keep receiving ideas that will challenge your mind, expand your vision, and accelerate your learning. Remember, those who think like the majority live like the majority, but those who choose to think differently.
The word law sounds confident, final, as if reality signed a contract and agreed to follow it forever. In physics, the word is used with that same seriousness, but without any assumption of authority behind it. No one enforces a physical law. Nothing checks compliance. There are no penalties handed down for violation. The law holds anyway. That alone deserves attention. There is no built-in requirement that the universe behave consistently. Nothing demands that the same setup, repeated at different times or places, must lead to the same outcome, and yet it does, with reliability strong enough that entire technologies, predictions, and measurements depend on it without hesitation. A physical law is not a command given to nature. It is a regularity discovered through repeated failure to find exceptions. Drop an object, heat a metal, charge a capacitor, send light through glass, change the location, the time, the observer, the surrounding conditions. The relationship repeats, not approximately, not most of the time. The same connection appears again and again. That repetition is the strange part. Physical laws do not explain why the universe behaves this way. They describe how reliably it behaves this way. Take gravity. Objects accelerate downward at a predictable rate near Earth. The law does not instruct the object to fall. It states that whenever mass and distance appear in that arrangement, the same outcome follows. The law is a compressed summary of behavior written after observation. Physics does not invent laws and impose them on reality. Physics notices that reality refuses to vary in certain ways. A law is what remains when preference, intention, and opinion are removed, leaving only what repeats no matter who checks. This leads to a consequence people often overlook. If something violates a physical law, it does not qualify as rare or unusual. It simply never appears in experiments, regardless of how carefully the conditions are arranged. That is why physical laws feel absolute. They are not supported by authority. They are supported by every failed attempt to break them. At the same time, these laws are restrained. They do not specify everything that will happen. They limit what cannot happen, regardless of clever design or effort. That restraint is exactly where their strength comes from. Taken seriously, laws stop resembling rigid formulas and start resembling the framework holding everything else in place. And that leaves a question that refuses to disappear. If the universe follows laws so reliably, where do they come from? And why does nature obey descriptions written by creatures inside it? That tension sits at the center of physics, and it does not resolve easily. That question stays in the air because the word law quietly pushes the mind in the wrong direction. A physical law often sounds like a powerful rule running the universe from behind the scenes, something active, something in charge. But at the deepest level, a law is none of those things. A law is a relationship. More exactly, it is a relationship that stays the same while everything around it changes. That is what separates a law from a coincidence. Materials can change, locations can change, sizes can change, conditions can change, and yet the same connection between quantities keeps showing up. The law does not live inside the object being studied. It lives in how measurements stay linked across many situations. This already pushes against how people usually think about rules. Rules often sound like instructions. Do this, avoid that. Physics does not operate that way. Objects do not check a rule book before behaving. Nothing pauses to see whether it is allowed to move. The law is never consulted. The law is written afterward. What physicists actually track are numbers, distances, times, masses, charges, speeds. One value is changed, another responds, and the search is for a link that refuses to disappear. When that link survives every attempt to disturb it, it earns the title law. So a law is not something the universe follows. A law is something the universe never contradicts. That difference changes how the whole subject works, because it means laws do not push events forward. They sit above events, describing how behavior stays tied together across many cases. This is where everyday thinking tends to slip. It feels natural to say a law causes behavior. Gravity causes falling. Electrical laws cause current. But the direction is reversed. Objects behave first. Laws are written later to describe how that behavior stays connected across different setups. The law describes consistency, not control. A simple example helps. Take a spring. Pull it a little, it resists a little. Pull it more, it resists more. Double the stretch, double the resistance. Change the spring, and the exact numbers change, but the link between stretch and force stays. The law is not hiding inside the spring deciding how to respond. The law captures how two measurements stay linked over many trials. At its base, that is all a law ever is, a stable connection between quantities. Now comes a part that often surprises people. Laws do not describe events. They describe limits. A law draws boundaries around which relationships are allowed to exist. Inside those boundaries, many outcomes remain possible. Outside them, nothing ever appears, no matter how carefully the setup is arranged. That explains why laws feel strict without being detailed. They do not tell you what will happen next. They tell you what will never happen at all. This role becomes clearer with conservation laws. Energy provides one example, but the same structure appears with momentum, electric charge, and rotation. These quantities move between objects, change form, or spread out, yet the total remains fixed. Nothing in the system tries to keep the total unchanged. The conservation appears only after everything settles. If an experiment ends with extra energy appearing from nowhere, the response is not excitement. The response is error, because the law does not bend. This shows another important feature. A law does not care about size. The same relationships apply to falling stones, moving planets, vibrating atoms, and distant galaxies. The numbers change, the units change, the surroundings change, the relationship stays. That wide reach is not assumed. It is earned through testing in many different situations. This is another place where expectations fail. People often expect rules to come from purpose or design. Physical laws come from neither. They are noticed because even disorder respects them. Chaotic systems obey laws just as strictly as neat ones. Wild air motion follows the same equations as smooth flow. A crashing wave respects conservation just as much as a clockwork machine. The law does not disappear when behavior looks messy. It remains in place because it never depended on tidy outcomes. This leads to an important clarification. A law does not guarantee prediction. It guarantees constraint. You may fail to predict what happens next, while still knowing certain outcomes will never appear. That certainty is where physics draws its strength, and this is where the word law earns its weight. A physical law is the strongest claim science makes, stronger than a model, stronger than a story, stronger than an explanation. It says, across all tested cases, under all accessible conditions, this relationship holds without exception. That does not make laws untouchable. New discoveries can refine them or reveal deeper structures beneath them. Even then, the older law survives inside its tested range. Newton's laws still guide bridges and baseballs. Ohm's law still guides circuits. Thermodynamic laws still govern engines and cells. The law remains because it was never about perfection. It was about consistency. At the deepest level, a law in physics is a statement about what stays fixed while everything else rearranges. It is the frame holding change together. And that brings back the question quietly waiting underneath all of this. If laws describe consistency rather than control, why does the universe show consistency at all? That question stays because laws do more than describe stability. They shape how reasoning itself works in physics. When a physicist faces a new situation, the first step is rarely prediction. The first step is elimination. A law immediately rules things out. You may not know what will happen when systems interact, but a law tells you what outcomes cannot appear under any arrangement. That power comes from the fact that laws apply before details are filled in. They operate at the level of structure, not outcome. This is how laws actually get used. Suppose two objects collide. You may not know their final speeds. You may not know the direction they move afterward. But conservation laws already fix the range of possibilities. Energy and momentum place boundaries around every allowed result. Any answer outside those boundaries is dismissed instantly, no matter how clever the explanation sounds. The law does not predict a single future. It restricts the space of futures. This is why laws remain useful, even when prediction fails. Weather cannot be forecast perfectly. Turbulence resists exact calculation. Human motion is wildly complex. Yet every one of these systems still obeys the same laws. Even when outcomes vary, relationships stay intact. This leads to a surprising result. Uncertainty in outcomes does not weaken laws. It highlights their role. A law remains exact, even when predictions are rough. That feels backward at first. People often expect exact laws to produce exact answers. Physics shows the opposite. Laws define constraints so strong that even randomness cannot escape them. This is easiest to see in statistics. Take a gas. Individual molecules move unpredictably. Collisions vary. Paths twist endlessly. Yet pressure, temperature, and volume stay linked by precise relationships. The law does not follow single particles. It governs the collective behavior without tracking details. Nothing in the gas coordinates. Nothing averages on purpose. The law emerges because every motion still respects the same restrictions. Here, a law does not describe what each piece does. It describes what the whole cannot avoid doing. This is one of the most counterintuitive features of physical laws. They grow stronger as systems grow more complex. That strength leads to consequences that often surprise people. One of them is this: multiple laws apply at the same time. No system ever follows just one law. A falling object respects gravity, energy conservation, momentum conservation, and constraints imposed by material strength all at once. These laws do not compete. They intersect. Each one trims the list of possible behaviors further. The final outcome sits at the intersection of all constraints. This is how physics stays coherent. You do not choose which law applies. All relevant ones apply together, automatically. The result is not negotiated. It is determined by compatibility. This explains why adding information does not remove laws. It narrows possibilities. Another surprising result follows from this. A law can remain correct even when the explanation behind it changes. This happens repeatedly in physics. Newton's laws described motion accurately long before deeper theories existed. Later work revealed broader frameworks that changed how motion was explained, yet Newton's laws stayed valid within their tested range. They never stopped working. They simply stopped being the deepest description available. That tells us something important about what laws are. They are not guesses about hidden causes. They are records of consistency. That is why laws age well. Now consider a paradox people often stumble into. If laws are descriptions written by humans, why do they feel so absolute? The answer lies in their origin. A law is not declared after a few successful tests. It survives relentless attempts to dismantle it. Physicists try extreme conditions, unusual materials, edge cases, and clever tricks. The law earns its status by refusing to fail. This gives laws a special role. They are not opinions strengthened by agreement. They are conclusions strengthened by resistance. That resistance shapes meaning. A law tells you something about the universe that remains true regardless of preference, perspective, or scale. It tells you reality has structure that does not bend to narrative. That realization carries weight beyond equations. It tells you the universe is not arbitrary. Events may appear chaotic, unpredictable, or complex, yet they unfold inside boundaries that never move. That makes explanation possible at all. Without laws, there could still be events. There could still be motion. There could still be change. But there could be no science. No comparison would hold. No experiment would repeat. No lesson would carry forward. A law gives memory to the universe. It allows the present to resemble the past in specific ways. And now the meaning comes into view. A physical law says that beneath all variation, something stays fixed. It says that while appearances change, relationships endure. It says that the universe does not reinvent itself moment to moment. That does not remove mystery, it sharpens it. Because laws answer how behavior stays linked while leaving the deeper question open, why this structure exists at all. Physics does not claim to answer that fully. It claims something narrower and more solid. It claims that whatever the universe is doing, it does so within limits that never waver. Those limits are what we call laws. They are not the actors in the story. They are the grammar. Without grammar, sounds still exist. With grammar, meaning appears. In the same way, events still happen without explanation. With laws, those events become intelligible. And that is why laws sit at the center of physics, not as commands, not as causes, not as decorations, as the unchanging framework that allows change to make sense at all. That realization tends to pull people forward because it suggests that learning physics is not about collecting facts. It is about learning the boundaries within which every fact must live. And those boundaries remain even as knowledge grows, even as explanations deepen, even as the universe continues doing what it has always done, behaving consistently without asking permission. At this point, the role of a law in physics comes into view without decoration. A law is not a belief about how the universe should behave. It is a record of how the universe has behaved every time we have been able to test it across places, scales, and conditions. It is a statement of consistency that reality keeps confirming. That consistency is what allows physics to function at all. After a law is established, it turns into a tool. It allows reasoning without seeing the outcome first. It allows confidence that certain results will never appear, even when the exact result remains unknown. That is the practical strength of a law. It does not describe the future in detail. It limits the future to a narrow range of allowed outcomes. This explains why very different systems can be discussed using the same laws. A swinging pendulum, a satellite orbit, and an electron bound in an atom behave differently, yet they remain tied to the same constraints. Surface details vary, the relationships remain. This also explains why laws survive progress. When physics advances, earlier laws are not discarded the way mistaken ideas are. They remain valid within the range where they were tested, even as broader descriptions add more structure underneath. Bridges still stand because Newton's laws hold. Circuits still function because electrical laws hold. Engines still run because thermodynamic laws hold. That persistence tells us something important about what is solid knowledge. Certain relationships hold without exception in every experiment performed so far. Energy does not appear from nothing. Momentum balances during interaction. Electric charge remains conserved. These statements are not guesses. They are the strongest claims science makes. At the same time, there are limits to what is known. Physics does not explain why the universe has laws rather than complete disorder. It does not explain why these particular relationships exist instead of others. It does not explain why consistency exists at all. Those questions remain open. That boundary between what is established and what remains unanswered is part of the structure, not a weakness. Laws tell us how far reasoning can go without speculation. They mark the edge where description ends and deeper explanation has not yet arrived. Taken together, this forms a clear world view. The universe is not free of constraint, and it is not fixed down to every detail. It operates within strict limits while allowing variation inside those limits. Events can surprise, yet they never violate the relationships holding everything together. That balance explains why prediction can be difficult while reliability remains absolute. It also explains why progress in science comes from tightening constraints rather than adding stories. Each new law or deeper version of an existing one removes possibilities rather than increasing them. That narrowing is progress. The takeaway is simple and strong. A physical law is the strongest form of knowledge available about the world. It does not tell us everything. It tells us what reality never does. That is enough. Because knowing what cannot happen allows technology to function, explanations to hold, and learning to continue without collapse. The universe may remain incomplete to us, but it is consistent. It behaves in ways that can be relied on, and every time a law holds, it confirms the same fact. The world is structured in a way that allows it to be studied, shared, and explained, again and again, without exception.
You know what's strange about the way people approach getting things done? They treat it like a battle against time itself. They make lists, they schedule every minute, they push harder and harder until they collapse. And then they wonder why nothing actually gets finished. Here's the real puzzle. The people who seem to accomplish the most aren't the ones grinding away 16 hours a day. They're often working less, enjoying it more, and producing work that actually matters. How is that possible? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about willpower or discipline or managing your time better. Those things help, sure, but they're missing the fundamental principle. The real secret is understanding what work actually is at the level of your brain. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. When you sit down to work, you probably think the goal is to spend time working. That's the first mistake. Time spent is not the same as work done. You can sit at a desk for 8 hours and accomplish almost nothing. We've all done it. The second mistake is even more subtle. People think that if they just eliminate distractions, they'll be productive. So they find a quiet room, they close the door, they clear their desk, and then nothing happens. Or worse, something does happen, but it's the wrong thing. They spend 3 hours perfecting something that doesn't matter. Why? Because productivity isn't about removing obstacles. It's about understanding how the brain actually processes work. And the brain has some very particular rules about what it can and cannot do. Here's the first principle. The brain can only hold about 3 or 4 distinct ideas at once in active thought, not more. That's not a limitation we can overcome with practice. That's architecture. When you try to think about too many things simultaneously, the brain doesn't just slow down, it starts making errors. It drops pieces. It confuses relationships between ideas. Now watch what happens when someone tries to be productive without understanding this. They make a list with 20 items. They tell themselves they'll work on all of them today. Maybe they even assign time blocks. 9 to 10, work on the report. 10 to 11, respond to correspondence. 11 to 12, plan next week. But here's what actually happens in the brain. Every time you switch between tasks, there's a setup cost. The brain has to clear out the current problem, load in the new problem, retrieve the relevant context, and rebuild the mental model. That takes energy and time. If you're switching every hour, you're spending a huge fraction of your day just loading and unloading mental states. The really productive people, they don't do this. They work on one thing, maybe two if they're related, for as long as the problem demands. They let the brain build up a full, rich model of the problem space. And once that model is built, the brain can do something remarkable. It can work on the problem even when you're not consciously thinking about it. You've experienced this. You work hard on something, get stuck, go for a walk, and suddenly the solution appears. That's not magic. That's the brain continuing to process in the background. But it can only do this if you've given it enough focused time to build the model in the first place. Here's the second principle. Real work happens in bursts, not in steady streams. The brain has different modes of operation. There's a focused mode where you're actively manipulating ideas, and there's a diffuse mode where connections form more loosely. Both are necessary. Neither is optional. Think about reading a difficult technical book. You can't just read for 6 hours straight and expect to understand it. What actually works is reading intensely for an hour, then doing something completely different, walking, washing dishes, staring at the ceiling. During that diffuse time, the brain is consolidating what you learned, finding connections, moving information into longer-term storage. But people don't structure their work this way. They think breaks are wasted time, so they push through, staying in focused mode until their brain simply refuses to cooperate anymore. And then they wonder why they're exhausted but haven't learned anything. The truly productive approach is different. Work intensely on one problem for 60 to 90 minutes. Not sort of working, not working while distracted, but really focusing every available mental resource on that single problem. Then stop. Completely stop. Do something that requires no mental effort at all. What happens during that break is critical. The brain reviews what just happened. It strengthens the important connections and weakens the irrelevant ones. It finds patterns you didn't consciously notice. When you come back to the work, you're not just rested, you actually understand the problem better than you did before the break. Now here's where it gets interesting. The third principle, the brain is remarkably good at knowing what's important, but only if you let it. There's a natural filtering system that sorts problems by urgency and significance. But this system gets overridden when you try to force everything to be equally important. Watch what happens when someone makes a list of 20 tasks and tries to treat them all as critical. The brain can't do it. It rebels. It chooses randomly, or it procrastinates on everything, or it picks the easiest tasks rather than the important ones. Why? Because when everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. The natural filtering system shuts down. The solution is counterintuitive. Instead of trying to do everything, explicitly decide that most things won't get done today. Pick one, maybe two, genuinely important problems. Tell yourself clearly and deliberately, these are the only things that matter today. Everything else can wait. The brain needs this. It needs to know where to allocate resources. Once you give it clear priorities, something remarkable happens. All that worry about the other tasks fades away. The brain stops spending energy maintaining those other mental states, and suddenly you have much more capacity available for the actual work. But here's the crucial part. Those one or two tasks have to be real work, not administrative shuffling. Real work means grappling with problems that don't have obvious solutions. Writing something new, figuring out why an experiment failed, designing something that's never been designed before, the kind of thing where you have to think. Most of what people call being busy isn't this. It's responding to correspondence, attending meetings, reorganizing files, making plans. These things feel like work because they consume time and energy, but they're not work in the deep sense. They're maintenance, and maintenance expands to fill whatever time you give it. Here's the fourth principle. The brain needs to see progress, not just activity. There's a feedback system that monitors whether effort is leading to results. When that system sees progress, it releases energy and motivation to continue. When it doesn't see progress, it shuts down. This is why people get stuck in procrastination loops. They start working on something difficult. It doesn't come together immediately. The brain's monitoring system says, "This isn't working. Let's try something easier." so they switch to checking correspondence or tidying their desk or planning. Those activities feel productive because they complete quickly. The brain gets its progress signal, and it feels good, but nothing important actually happened. And eventually, the brain notices this too. The result is a peculiar kind of exhaustion. You worked all day, you were busy all day, but you can't point to anything meaningful that got done. The way out is to change how you define progress. For difficult work, progress isn't finishing. Progress is understanding the problem better than you did an hour ago. Progress is trying an approach and discovering why it doesn't work. Progress is writing a rough version that you know isn't right yet, but that makes the problem concrete. Once you redefine progress this way, the brain's feedback system works with you instead of against you. You work for 90 minutes, and even if you didn't solve the problem, you understand it better. That's progress. The brain registers it as such and stays engaged. This connects to something deeper about how understanding actually develops. You can't force understanding. You can't schedule it. What you can do is put yourself in a position where understanding can happen. That means engaging repeatedly with a problem, looking at it from different angles, trying things that don't work, building intuition slowly. Think about learning physics or mathematics or any complex skill. The people who actually master it don't just study harder. They study differently. They work problems until they get stuck. Then they think about why they got stuck. They try to explain concepts in their own words. They look for multiple ways to approach the same idea. This takes time. It takes many sessions of focused work with breaks in between. But it produces something that memorization and grinding never can. Genuine understanding that stays with you and applies to new situations. Now, here's what all of this means for being productive. Real productivity isn't about doing more things. It's about making progress on things that actually matter. And to do that, you need to work with your brain's architecture instead of against it. Start by identifying one problem worth solving. Not 10, not 5, 1. Something where progress would actually change things. Then clear away everything else, not forever, just for the next 90 minutes. During those 90 minutes, focus completely. No half attention, no checking other things, no multitasking. Just you and the problem. Work until you get tired or stuck, whichever comes first. Don't push past that point. The tired brain doesn't produce good work. It produces work that you'll have to redo. When you stop, really stop. Go for a walk. Make something to eat. Do anything that requires no significant mental effort. Don't feel guilty about this. This is part of the work. During this time, your brain is consolidating, connecting, preparing for the next session. Then, and only then, come back for another focused session. With a fresh brain, the problem often looks different. Solutions that weren't visible before become obvious. Approaches that seemed impossibly complex become manageable. Do this pattern twice, maybe 3 times in a day, and you'll accomplish more than most people do in a week of scattered effort. Not because you worked longer, but because you worked with purpose and with an understanding of how the brain actually functions. The people who seem impossibly productive aren't superhuman. They're not more disciplined or more motivated. They've just figured out this pattern, consciously or unconsciously. They protect their focus. They work on one thing at a time. They take real breaks, and they trust that the brain will do its job if they give it the right conditions. There's one more crucial piece to this. You have to become comfortable with leaving things undone. Not important things. Those get your focused attention. But all the small tasks, the administrative details, the things that could be done but don't really matter, these have to wait. This is harder than it sounds. We're taught that being responsible means handling everything promptly, but that's backwards. Being truly responsible means recognizing what's important and protecting your ability to do it well. Everything else is just noise. When you work this way, something unusual happens. You stop feeling busy all the time. Instead, you feel calm and focused during work sessions and genuinely relaxed during breaks. And at the end of the week, you look back and realize you accomplished more than you used to in a month. That's what real productivity feels like. Not like grinding, not like forcing yourself, not like battling against time. It feels like the natural result of understanding how the brain works and cooperating with it. The question isn't whether you can be this productive. You can. The question is whether you're willing to work differently than everyone around you, to focus on one thing when others are juggling 10, to take breaks when others are pushing through, to leave minor tasks undone when others are scrambling to handle everything. It takes confidence to work this way. You'll look like you're doing less, but you'll know something that others don't. Real work isn't measured in hours or tasks completed. It's measured in problems solved, in understanding gained, in things created that didn't exist before. That's the kind of productivity that matters. That's the kind that compounds over time, building on itself, creating something genuinely new. And it's available to anyone who's willing to stop fighting their brain and start working with it instead. Try this tomorrow. Pick one problem. Give it 90 minutes of complete focus. Take a real break. Come back fresh. See what happens. You might be surprised at how much is possible when you stop trying to do everything and start doing something that matters. There's something else that happens when you work this way. Something that takes longer to notice but matters more than anything else. The quality of your thinking changes. When you're constantly scattered, jumping between tasks, always half distracted, your brain never gets to go deep. You stay on the surface of problems. You find the obvious solutions, the conventional approaches, the things everyone else would think of. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing remarkable about it either. But when you give your brain extended time with a single problem, something different becomes possible. After the first 30 minutes, you exhaust the obvious approaches. After 60 minutes, you start seeing patterns that weren't visible before. After 90 minutes, if you're really focused, you sometimes reach a state where the problem starts revealing its own structure. This is where the interesting work lives. Not in the first answer that comes to mind, but in the fifth or sixth attempt after you've tried the simple approaches and found them wanting. That's when you have to actually think, when you have to look at the problem from angles that aren't immediately obvious. Most people never reach this depth because they don't stay with any single problem long enough. They get uncomfortable with not having an immediate answer, so they move on to something easier, or they get interrupted and lose the thread entirely. Either way, they stay forever on the surface. The irony is that the surface is where everyone else is working too. So if you stay there, you're competing with everyone. Your work looks like everyone else's work. Your solutions are the same solutions everyone else finds. There's no advantage to be gained. But go deeper, stay focused longer, and you're suddenly in territory where few people ever venture. Not because it's forbidden or difficult to access, but simply because it requires sustained attention. And most people don't give themselves permission to work that way. This is where the compound effects start to appear. Each time you solve a problem at depth, you build intuition about how those kinds of problems work. The next time you face something similar, you start deeper than you did before. Over months and years, this adds up. You develop a way of seeing problems that others don't have. This isn't about being smarter. It's about being willing to sit with difficulty long enough to see through it. Anyone can develop this capacity. It just requires protecting your focus consistently over time. There's a final piece worth understanding. When you work with genuine focus, you're not just getting things done. You're training your brain to focus. The ability to concentrate is like a muscle. It strengthens with use and weakens without it. Every time you maintain focus, despite the urge to check something else, you're making it easier to focus next time. This means the method gets easier the longer you use it. The first few times, 90 minutes of unbroken focus might feel nearly impossible. Your brain will fight you, offering up every distraction and excuse, but stay with it. And within weeks, that same focus starts to feel natural. Eventually, it becomes your default mode rather than something you have to force. That's when productivity stops feeling like work and starts feeling like inevitability. You sit down, focus comes naturally, problems yield to sustained attention, and meaningful work happens almost effortlessly. Not because the work got easier, but because you've trained yourself to engage with it properly. This is what's possible when you stop treating productivity as time management and start treating it as attention management. Everything flows from that one shift in understanding.